All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick here will be doing an NFL mock draft, a three-rounder, about 2 weeks out from April's draft in Green Bay. We'll be doing these in about 10-pick increments, so we'll be quick and sweet about it, but also offering a lot of detail and a lot of good selections here for a lot of these teams. I think right now, clear-cut, number one, Cam Ward's been that way the whole cycle. The real draft seems to start at 2, Nick, and I think this one's going to be a mystery up until the minute this pick is, put in with the league office, because you're not sure if they're going to go quarterback, best available, maybe trade down potentially. I think the best option would be to go with Travis Hunter, who's the best player available, which would lead the Giants to taking Abdul Carter. I think would be making a lot of sense for them. Shedeur Sanders certainly is still there, and of course there's a lot of ties to him potentially being there, but with all the quarterback activity this offseason by the Giants, I don't think that's going to be on the radar. And then rounding out, 4 and 5, linemen for the Patriots and the Jags. The draft is going to start at number 2, Nick. What the Cleveland Browns do is going to dictate the remainder of this process, and I think Hunter's going to make it very easy for them to get things started.
Whatever pick the Cleveland Browns take will lead to a ripple effect for the rest of the draft. You have two, quarterback needy teams at picks 2 and 3, but the best quarterback will be off the board at number 1. Cam Ward, I think, is the undisputed best quarterback in this class. I think he's the guy that got the most upside, the most, the highest pro potential, and, clearly makes a lot of sense here. The Titans are canceling workouts with Shedeur Sanders. It seems like they're laser focused on drafting Cam Ward, which I think makes a lot of sense. I think Cam Ward will be a really solid pocket passer for them. He's very accurate, really stands up well in the pocket. The merits of him, and I think he'll fit well in the system in Tennessee. I question the vision a little bit with the Titans, but I think bringing Ward in could certainly start to put things in the right direction. It would not shock me if the Browns take a quarterback at number 2, which would most likely be Shedeur Sanders. I'm giving that like a 95% chance that they would do that at number 2 if they're going to take a quarterback. But I think Travis Hunter makes sense in this mock because this is a team that I've heard as of late, wants to make a move and not grab a quarterback here. They don't have a lot of confidence in Sanders or any of their quarterbacks, higher up in this draft class. And the same thing for the Giants. The Giants made a bunch of quarterback moves in the offseason, bringing in a bunch of different pieces, Jameis Winston, Russell Wilson. So it seems like they're not going to make that move at quarterback. Obviously, the Giants would like to get Travis Hunter if he's available at 3, and I certainly think they would draft him if he was available at 3. But if he goes to the Browns and Abdul Carter, best player on the board, continue to beef up that really strong defensive line and develop a really talented unit there, makes a lot of sense for me. I think the Giants would do well with Abdul Carter. Will Campbell and Mason Graham are 2 picks that make a lot of sense for the next 2 teams, for the Pats and the Jags. The Patriots, they need to protect their golden goose and Drake May, who they drafted last year. And the Jaguars, they need some help on, in the run defense. Certainly, they need to really beef up that interior and bring in a guy in Mason Graham who's a big physical beast to help out some of the talent that they just, picked up the option on Trayvon Walker, who was a previous number 1 overall pick for them. They want to continue to add depth on that defensive line, and bringing in a guy like Mason Graham would be a really solid piece to add.
I think another one that might have ripple effects is Ashton Jeanty going potentially not to the Raiders. I think that seems like a pretty obvious selection at this moment in time, because they lack star power at the running back position, and this would be great for Chip Kelly's offense that they're really trying to, bulk up, snagging Geno Smith, got some weapons around him. Brock Bowers coming off an elite year. So this offense would certainly, start loading up on some young talent around the veteran. But if they don't go Gianti, it's going to be very interesting to see how the rest would play out, because this one seems like it's, locked in stone, Nick. Tyler Warren to the Jets, another team just not sure what they're going to do. Tight end's a big position of need for them, as is quarterback, though. So we'll find out what happens with the Jets. I think Justin Fields, though, they're going to give him as many opportunities as they can to succeed. So I think they're going to pass on a passer for now. Tetairoa McMillan, he's going to come in there and try to be one of the top targets for Bryce Young, who had a phenomenal resurgence after being benched, coming back out, and he was playing lights out with limited weapons. Pair him up with Xavier Legette. I think that'd make a lot of sense. The Saints, their roster is in a lot of hell due to their cap situation. I think James Pierce, though, he's a phenomenal edge rusher. They're going to be a game changer for the future. And then the Bears, Nick, you got to be very happy with what they're accomplishing in free agency to really beef up this roster. I think, adding some better defensive linemen is going to be the next phase for Ryan Poles, and Grant's certainly going to check all those areas when it comes to the run defense and being a nice big body that can clog gaps there. What's your favorite pick out of the ones I just mentioned?
I think, the Saints are a very interesting position. Obviously, their cap issues are well noted, right? They always seem to have this cap problem. They move a lot of deals around. They restructure stuff, make it work. But they need to get some help on the defensive line. And certainly, off the edge there, Cameron Jordan looks like he's edging closer to retirement, 35 years old. So, he might retire and head into a career in television. That seems to be the rumor that I've been hearing as of late. So bringing a guy like James Pierce, who's a home wrecker, really solid coming off there. Also, wouldn't be surprised if they maybe go quarterback there. That's certainly a pick to keep an eye on. I think Tyler Warren would be really cool cool to see with the Jets. The Jets, I think they are in a better position than most people give them credit for. I don't think the Fields signing is an atrocious sign. I think it's a solid bridge quarterback. And Warren, he's such a dynamic tight end. You can really get a lot and do a lot with him. As for the Panthers, I think McMillan would be a really solid add. Bryce Young, like you said, started to resurge his career a little bit, looked really good in the second half of the season, looked like a lot of confidence on his shoulders finally, was focused, playing good football. Give him a weapon, give him somebody to throw to, and McMillan's got that incredible speed, such a talented wide receiver out of Arizona. I think that'd be a really solid pick.
Well, again, 11 through 19, the 49ers can do whatever. I think Mike Green just makes too much sense for them. The Cowboys, they need help in the run defense department. Walter Nolan can bring that to the table. We made this mock before Teron Armstead retired, so I think the Dolphins could potentially go offensive line, but Jedi Barron's not bad to pair him up with Jalen Ramsey. And at the bottom, we have 3 straight SEC all-caliber players, Nick, including 2 athletic linebackers. The Bengals need drastic help when it comes to their run defense department. Walker, probably not going to be the best guy for trying to get immediate upgrade in that area, but I think this guy's an elite player that might end up going top 10 due to his abilities as a patroller and a pass rusher. What's your favorite selection here?
I think one that we didn't highlight here was with the Falcons with Dominic with Azaraku coming out of Boston College. He's such a talented player that they could bring in to beef up that defensive unit. This is a Falcons offense I think is trending in the right direction. They made the move to Penix, so I think it was really solid for them last year. Bringing in Donovan Azaraku, who had 21 tackles for loss, 16.5 sacks last year, the All-American out of BC, would be a phenomenal add, I think, for this team. Would be really solid coming off the edge. I also think Great Zabel going to the Cardinals, playing him on the interior, could be really solid. A big, bulky offensive line piece from North Dakota State, who's impressing people at the Senior Bowl. Combine was pretty solid for Zabel as well. Could really work out well for those two teams, picking at 15 and 16.
Looking at 20 through 28, SEC continues to dominate. You got 2 receivers, one from Missouri, another from Ohio State, filling big needs for Justin Herbert and Bo Nix. Malachi Starks, I think, would be a perfect fit for the Vikings, what they want to do on that side of the ball after losing Cam Bynum to the Colts. Armin Membu, I don't know if he'll actually end up falling down to 25, but the Texans would absolutely love to have him, a versatile offensive lineman. And of course, the standout here, Nick, Shedeur Sanders falling to 21. I know people might think this is unrealistic, but this is the draft. This is just how it works. All that has to happen is 2 or 3 teams that have a need at quarterback opt to go elsewhere, and you're in a free fall. And I think that's certainly something that's going to happen. It's not a shot at Shedeur Sanders by any means. I would just say in terms of team, in terms of value and team needs, is going to cost him to fall right to the Steelers. So I think would love to have him. I think it'd be a great fit. So what do you think about Shedeur going to 21? Something that a lot of people are not penciling in.
A lot of people are not penciling it, but I think it makes a lot of sense. I mean, I don't want to pull up a comparison here, but I think when you look at, Aaron Rodgers, a lot of people thought he could be the first overall pick in his draft class 2005. It was him and Alex Smith. They went back and forth. The Niners went Alex Smith, and then the rest is history. Rodgers fell down to 24th, kept sliding. There were just not a lot of quarterback-hungry teams in that 2005 draft class. He got passed over and over again. Everyone's seen the videos and the photos of him in the green room. Shedeur, I could see a potential similar type of slide down to 21. It really is in that sort of similar range when you get to that, early to mid-20s there. Could work out well. The Steelers, that could certainly be a solid landing spot for him. I think it can make a lot of sense. I think Luther Burden to the Broncos would be phenomenal. Another team that just drafted a young quarterback, Bo Nix, looked a lot better than I think a lot of people expected him to do this past season. Give him a weapon there. Burden's so talented, impressive player coming out of Missouri, and then his teammate and coming in at the tackle for the Texans right there. Mbabu is a really solid piece that I think could really fit well into an offensive line. I don't know if he will stay down there. Trey Amos as well as a player that I think is flying up draft boards. Really impressive how he looked at Alabama and Ole Miss, a talented player that would be really solid. The Rams picking in the first round for what feels like the first time in forever. That could be a really solid player to add at 26.
Looking at 29 through 36, which accumulates the end of round 1. 2 Super Bowl teams picking up great needs. Left tackle was a revolving door for the Chiefs. They'll pick up Josh Simmons there. Darius Alexander being an A+ replacement for Milton Williams. I think this one's going to be the lock of the draft if I had to put money on one of them. The Browns, they're going to go ahead and wait until day 2, Nick, to select a quarterback in Jackson Dart. Guy who's got phenomenal arm talent, didn't always rise up in the biggest moments, and certainly, seemed to struggle under pressure at times. I think this is a nice raw prospect that can really improve. That people think can even surge into the top 10 potentially. And you have 2 AFC South teams picking up young receivers that are phenomenally talented. Go ahead and highlight your favorites here, Nick.
I think this is one where you nailed it with the Eagles, right? Darius Alexander from Toledo would join his teammate on the Eagles, previous teammate from Toledo, Quinyon Mitchell, 2 Toledo Rockets that would be playing on this team, 2 defensively talented players coming out of that program. I think that'd be really solid here. I think Jackson Dart makes a lot of sense for the Browns. This is a guy that's flying up draft boards, right? All the talk is about Dart. You see this every year where one quarterback starts to absolutely skyrocket on draft boards. Dart's getting a lot of that love right now. I think it could make sense at Cleveland at 33. I think it's certainly worth taking a move on him. Simmons as well well to the Chiefs could be a really solid pick. The Bills picking up a cornerback and Maxwell Harrison makes a lot of sense as well. The Bills, their secondary looked very weak, and that seemed to be the weakest point when they had to make substitutions in the Chiefs game. The Chiefs just picked apart their secondary and attacked the weak links. Got to get some more depth there. I think they have to go corner in the first round.
Now I move to 37 through 45. Jack Besh, this guy has had a phenomenal offseason process. Certainly wishing the best for him and his family. Going to New England to help out Drake May would be a phenomenal addition. He's a nice physical receiver. The Bears here have a pair of selections. Amari and Hampton fills that running back at need, and they get a nice edge in Nick Skortnick. I think that'd be an incredible haul for them. But let's go ahead and highlight number 43, Xavier Watts. A team in the 49ers who were beat up all season long. This is a team that's still very scary, and now they have these early draft selections. I think with the loss of Talanoa Hufanga, this is an ideal player to replace him. A guy who has great trigger, nice instincts, highly intelligent football player, can play in the box or at free safety. I think the 49ers here to be getting a steal. What do you think of that? And, of course, the Bears adding two great players with their early picks.
If the 49ers can land Watts and Green at their respective picks, I think it's an A-plus draft for them early on, right? I think you can add a guy in Xavier Watts who's uber talented, such a good piece for your secondary, as well as Mike Green, who I didn't touch on in the first round. The Niners, they find themselves in a good spot. This is still a championship contending roster, in my opinion, as of right now, and they have early picks in the first round and the second round. They can really get some damage done. Another team with a lot of picks is the Bears. I think the Bears roster is in a really good spot. I think, I thought the Bears would do a lot better than they did last year, but I think this is a team that's still heading in the right direction. Certainly a tough division, but you're going to probably see a fall off from Minnesota. Some question marks about what the Detroit Lions can do this year, as well as Green Bay, who look a little bit shaky. This is a big opportunity for the Bears to stock up on talent and really help out Caleb Williams. Bringing in a running back in Hampton who's got great speed, great field vision, and a high football IQ would be a solid add, while also adding a great edge piece in Nick Scrouton and getting him at really good value at 41. Two solid picks there that they can really do a lot with early in the second round.
Now you look at 46 through 54, Xavier Estrepo, likely to fall after a 4.8 40 time. I mean, that's pretty abysmal for him. But this guy's a ball player, and he can go out and catch the football, makes phenomenal plays with his hands. He's got nice IQ as well. I think the Falcons would love to give Penix another weapon, a guy who can play football. At the end of the day, it's not always down to measurables and 40-yard dashes. Cardinals at 47, beefing up their interior defensive line with a phenomenal run stopper in Derek Harmon, who could potentially go first round. Donovan Jackson, a versatile player from Ohio State. Love what he does. I think, it checks all the boxes for the Dolphins. My favorite pick here, though, is probably number 51, Omar Norman Lott. He's seen Denver against Buffalo in that playoff game. They got absolutely grinded down against the run. Norman Lott, a guy who's got great quick speed, a nice motor. He's got strength, and he can even, provide some pass rushing as well. I think he just needs to find some more consistency in his game. This is a high riser. I think it's going to be highly impactful. And then I noticed, Tyreek Williams as well at 49. A nice start to the draft for the Bengals if they can get him alongside Jalen Walker.
This is a Bengals team that needs to start building up on defense. They have to improve this unit. That unit was absolutely dreadful for them last year. They got to find a way to be better on the defensive side of the ball. I think they have to continue to go with the defensive side of the ball over and over again, and hopefully build up that unit, because that's a unit that just really was struggling for them this past season. I think I like the pick here that we highlighted. Number 50 for the Seahawks. I'll highlight it right now. Landon Jackson, the edge rusher out of Arkansas. I think he could be really solid for this team. This is a guy that had a pretty good year last year for the Razorbacks. 10 tackles for loss, 6.5 sacks. A guy that's got really good speed. I think the footwork is solid. The hands are good as well. This is a guy that can come off the edge and add some pressure for this defensive line that needs some help. The Seahawks have some picks, in this second round where they can really get something done here. I think Restrepo, obviously the speed is a concern, but I think you can still get a lot of good usage out of him. For the Falcons there, they need weapons for their young quarterback. Again, a lot of these teams are young quarterbacks. They have to get weapons. Got to help out your quarterback. Might as well give a nice talented piece for the nice quarterback they have in Michael Penix.
Looking at 55 through 63. In this section, you have back-to-back South Carolina players, and a couple picks later, back-to-back from Iowa State. Nick Emenwarney had a phenomenal NFL combine. Slightly going to go higher than this. I think it's almost a guarantee he goes top, 40. But, positional value can lead to people falling, and I think the Buffalo Bills would love to have him. Out of those four players, Nick, who's your favorite?
Yeah, I think when you look at Jalen Knoll to the Detroit Lions, it makes a lot of sense. This is a Lions team that I think the jury's a little bit out on after a disappointing playoff showing from them after a strong regular season. They need some more weapons a little bit, in my opinion. You definitely add some depth. They have a lot of talented top-end weapons, but I think they could use some good rotational pieces. And Knoll was a really solid receiver for Iowa State that put up a lot of production and was really good for them. I think Kyle Kennard could be phenomenal for the Chargers here. This is a team that could use some help on the edge, certainly use some help in the defensive line. They're shuffling some pieces. They definitely have some older pieces they've let go. They've moved some contracts around. They need some guys to step up on that defensive line. It struggled last year at points. Bringing Kennard, who can bring a lot of pressure, really nice speed coming off the edge there, would be a really solid add.
Looking at 64 through 71, Benjamin Morrison of the Eagles. Seems like such a Philadelphia pick, right? A first-round talent sliding due to injury. And I think teams are kind of touching up on the tape a little bit, and it's causing him to fall a little bit. But it just seems like something they're going to do and pull the trigger on. And Benjamin Morrison's going to end up at a premier contender. Right here, Nick, at 65, Jalen Milroe. Again, you talk about things, becoming reality, and that's a quarterback sliding, and Milroe, a high-end talent, could go early on day one, but I think here he's going to slide to round 3, and I think the Giants would love the value across the board. Cam Scatterbo to the Chiefs as well. One of those picks I think would really piss off a lot of opponents, Nick, because he's just a hard-nosed player who can do a lot for you. And he's going to come in there, and he would certainly be of help for Kansas City. A lot of picks here that have a lot of potential to pay off.
Yeah, certainly some interesting picks here. Jalen Milroe going 65 to the Giants. I think that'd be a phenomenal pick, right? As a Giants fan, I'd absolutely love that. I think Milroe has a lot of high upside. A lot of conflicting reports the last couple of weeks. It seems like he may be in attendance for the draft, which would make you wager a guess that he believes he's going to be a first-round draft pick, or the NFL believes he's going to be a first-round draft pick. I don't know if he has that type of value there. I really think in the third round, that would be a really home run spot. Maybe he goes in the middle of the second round. I don't know what his true value is. It seems like it's all over the place. You can go anywhere from 10th pick to the 70th pick, it really feels like, with Milroe. There's a lot of high upside, but at 65, I think it's great value. The two Chiefs picks here at 63 and 66, I think, are very fascinating. CJ West, the defensive line piece from Indiana, would be a really solid piece. He was big and physical for them this year on the defensive line, was really good against the run. This is a guy that's really solid. And then Cam Scatterbo would be so fun to watch at Kansas City. I think people would absolutely hate that, to see such a talented back go there, because I think they would just plug him in and find success immediately. But they're a backfield that could use a little bit of help. They didn't get as much as they wanted out of their back, certainly in the second half of the season. Bringing in Scatterbo, who's so dynamic and super agile, a really solid player, would be a really nice add for the Chiefs here, who have two picks in short succession they could do a lot with.
Looking at 72 through 80, the Jets picking up an underrated right tackle. Cameron Williams played for a great Texas football team. Certainly didn't get enough love, but I think the scouts certainly are going to pay him a lot of respect. He's a really good run blocker. That's a big need for the Jets over there at the right tackle spot. 75 and 76, the Cowboys pick up a receiver in Isaiah Bond, who was a great playmaker in his career. And then Savion Williams would be the ideal replacement for Deebo Samuel in San Francisco. Nick, what do you make of that pick?
Yeah, I think it would be a phenomenal pick, right? I think this is a guy that Savion Williams is such a talented player at TCU. We really saw him excel this past season. He can be really good for this team. I think Kevin Winston from Penn State, the safety, going to the Bears, another team that's just continued to load up on talent. I really like what the Bears could do in this draft. Getting a guy like Winston, who certainly is dropping because of his positional value, but I think he's still a player that could be really solid for a team. Isaiah Bond would be really good, keeping him in the state of Texas, another dynamic weapon for Dak Prescott to work with. I think could really work out well for the Cowboys.
Kevin Winston, of course, didn't really play much this past year due to injury. And then Savion Williams, a guy who could work out of the slot and played running back half of the year for TCU. So that'd be a great pick. I'd love that one. Looking at 81 through 89. A couple of really good players here, Nick, that stole the show in college football. I think the Bengals continuing to load up on big men makes a lot of sense. Mason Taylor, old school type of football player. He's a guy you can look at as, being a guaranteed success. Anthony Belton, he's a massive player at left tackle. He really rose his stock this offseason with his performances, especially the one at the Senior Bowl. And then Quinshon Judkins checking another box for the Steelers, Nick. I think they'd be pretty happy with what they do to beef up their offense. But I know you've been critical of the front office at times. They don't make the smartest decisions when it comes to doing this. But if they would listen to us just a little bit, I think they could certainly revamp this offense, adding Shitter and Judkins.
I think it would certainly be a move to add Shitter and Judkins, move in the right direction. I've always been hypercritical of the Steelers front office. It feels like they kind of just rest on their laurels and don't really want to commit to a rebuild, but they also don't want to make the moves to contend. They're just kind of content with being a playoff team that gets knocked out in the first round. Bringing in a dynamic back like Judkins, who had some good experience playing at multiple programs, could be really solid for them. I think the Mason Taylor pick for the Chargers would be a phenomenal pick as well. He had a really good career at LSU, was a great target for them, was a key piece of that offense. Like you said, your prototypical tight end, you're going to get a very reliable prospect that I think would be really solid at pick 86. Belton as well at 88. He's really a versatile tackle that's improving his draft stock with solid performances in the pre-draft, festivities at the Senior Bowl, at his combine performance. I think Belton's just a great piece that would be really solid for Jags offensive line that could just use a little bit of help, nothing crazy. And then Quincy Riley is a player I want to highlight to the Packers. This is a secondary that needs some help. They need a little bit more depth there. They have some good players in the secondary, looked good certainly in the back half of last season, but Riley's a really solid asset coming out of Louisville, who I think is a really talented piece that you can plug in there. Picking him at 87 I think would be a really solid move for the Green Bay Packers, who are hosting the draft in a couple weeks.
Looking at 90 through 98, nice pass-catching tight end and Terrence Ferguson to the Rams. We have a run on guards here. Willie Lampkin to Baltimore. Tate Ratledge to KC, and then Luke Condra to the Eagles, a player that I really like. He has nice explosion off the snap, and I think he has good football IQ as well. I think he'd certainly fill a need that's now, having to be filled after the departure of Malik Becton, who was a great player for the Philadelphia Eagles. And of course, you have a nice defensive tackle here in Jordan Phillips, bringing plenty of strength to the table. I think this is going to be a steal for somebody, Nick, later on in day 2 out of Maryland.
Yeah, I think Jordan Phillips is a really talented piece from Maryland, a big physical player that's gritty in the trenches. Add him to the Saints defensive line that could use some help. I think that makes a lot of sense. I like all 3 of these guards here. I think Lampkin's a really talented piece. The Ravens seem to find the best out of their prospects, certainly seem to be getting guys where their value is being undervalued by other teams. I think Lampkin can be really solid there. Ratledge, reliable coming from Georgia, a really solid offensive line piece, could really mold into a talented player for the Chiefs. They need some offensive line help in the interior. Certainly, I think a guard would be really solid for them. And then Condra would be a nice add for the Super Bowl champions who beat the Chiefs in the Eagles. I think he was a really solid asset at Cincinnati here. I think all 3 of these guards are really good, and if they're all going in the 90s, I think that's certainly good value picks for the 3 teams that pick them up.
Looking at the final selections of our mock draft, we got 2 linebackers that is to cap things off. Versatile player in Barrett Carter, and then underrated linebacker that's really been rising his stock this offseason, Chris Paul. No relation to the star NBA player, but they're hoping they can get the same level of production out of him, that being the Lions, a team that can certainly use a little bit more depth at the middle of their defense, a guy with plenty of speed, some nice instincts and coverage, a name that doesn't get talked about at all, Nick, but another one of those guys who could certainly come in and provide a nice impact.
Yeah, I think Chris Paul will be phenomenal for the Lions. I think some of these players in these last couple of picks will be really good. Deion Walker for the Dolphins could be a really solid interior defensive line piece. They need some help in that interior. He's a solid asset out of Kentucky. Barrett Carter is a good player coming out of Clemson. The Rams could use a little bit of depth at linebacker, certainly a position they could look to add a few different guys here and there at. And then same thing for the Lions, right? Add Chris Paul, who's a veteran, a solid player, had a good career at Ole Miss. I think he's a really solid piece that you can plug in and be a good rotational piece early on and get a lot out of him.
That's going to be it for today's episode. As always, Nick, appreciate you joining me. Interesting 3-round mock here today. Plenty of variety. And I think, certainly when it comes to these quarterback selections, we could be way off. But I think this is a kind of more of a realistic approach compared to some of the other mocks that have guys like Jackson Dart going top 5.
Yeah, I don't think Jackson Dart will certainly rise that much. I wouldn't be surprised if he goes first round at the end of the day, but I think we're going to play the conservative, cautious approach and have him going in the first pick of the second round. I think this mock draft is really solid. A lot of teams are filling up their depth charts and adding some really key pieces to their defense and offense in the offseason. I'm excited to see what happens in Green Bay in just about 2 weeks.
Make sure to like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.